Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is Candace with Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. It is April 25th, 2018. Hi. I'm kind of still waking up. Had a little bit of coffee, not quite enough for this video. I have to tell you, I'm a little anxious because the last time I did this, and I'll be sure to plug in the video for the inauguration chart that I did for Trump last year, it caused a bit of a ruckus. I don't know if anybody else has seen it. I have intentionally not gone and looked at it and looked at any of the comments recently because I was kind of like, oh, this is just too much. But I'm proud to say that if you type in Trump astrology, my video comes in the top 3 in all of YouTube. So personally, maybe this is like my moment to like go out, but I'm like really proud about that because obviously it made enough of a stir and it created enough of an uproar to make me have, the opportunity to be here today. Reviewing that video, there are some things that I do want to do differently. So let me get some of this stuff out of the way first. Number 1. I am not here to discuss my political views, and I am going to, at the best of my abilities, not allow that to be something that is going to sway some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. I don't care if you're I kind of expected this. I'm not gonna start with my conspiracy theories, but I'm just gonna say I kind of expected that. So hopefully you guys are still here. I switched my internet source, so I'm hoping that it's going to be a little bit better now. So let's see what happens, because I'm still staring at a black screen. So give it just a second until it comes back, but I definitely can see all of your guys' comments. I think I'm coming back now, so I'm trying not to lag too much, but essentially, like I said, I am not interested in discussing my political views, and I don't want my political views to get in anywhere in this. However, I am going to be bringing up a multitude of different charts. And so that's the thing that I feel like is the best method to be able to like go and put all of these pieces together to be able to really study the symbolism of the particular degrees. So, pay attention and stay with me because it can kind of get very dense. And I have all the time in the world with you guys today. I set aside, you know, up to about like 2.5 hours, if that's how long this needs to take. Thank you guys for staying in the chat and for coming back. Let's go ahead and just get into like a brief discussion, because I've kind of hinted and given you guys some ideas about some of the things that I'm going to be talking about, some of the things that I'm going to be discussing. One of which is more specifically America's chart. The other one is that I have a new chart for you guys after doing days of digging and days of research. There are several people in the astrological community who are referencing not necessarily just looking at, you know, the Independence Day chart, which is the, you know, July 4th, 1776, but actually looking at the chart that is when the Declaration was actually starting to be put in motion, and it was sometime later. So I will show you that chart because it's another chart. And I want to be able to have all of the different angles to that. So many of you guys haven't even seen that chart yet. I have to be honest with you, like, I had no idea that this existed or that people were making references based off of that chart, but it will be making an appearance today. We're going to look at Trump's chart. We are going to look at both Bush's charts, so Bush, W. Bush and Senior. We're also going to be looking at Obama's chart, because everybody's always like asking about, all the Republicans are like, well, what about Obama? We're going to look at his chart too. But I want to link together a couple of things that kind of went off in my mind listening to some of the things that are going on politically in the past month. And those of you guys who have seen some of my other videos, sometimes I like to reference specifically the Sabian symbols, and I like to kind of get into the Sabian symbols. And maybe it's me, but when I start to see repetitive degrees in a president's charts, I kind of start to wonder if this is like linked. And so I've created a whole master list of these degrees that have a tendency to kind of repeat through the more recent several presidents' charts. We're going to take a look at what's going on in America's chart, and then I'm going to be putting Trump's chart on there as well, and we're going to look at some progression. So like I said, like, this is some pretty dense astrology stuff. Some of you guys, I'm hoping, you know, that you can kind of get the hang of it. I'm going to really take my time and try to thoroughly give you my perspective. And I opted to make this a live video because I didn't want to spend 3 hours in my astrology, like, you know, rabbit hole. I thought it would be better to kind of get on here and talk to you guys about this live, so that way I can interact with you and get some of your guys' perspectives. So thanks for letting me do my spiel. All right, so let's go ahead, and I've got tons of notes. If you guys have seen Always Sunny, you know, like when Dennis goes like crazy and he's got all of the boards and he's like trying to explain everything. That's pretty much been me for like the past week. It's been like several sit-down situations where I'm coming up with all these different perspectives based off the pattern. So I feel a little crazy. Let's go ahead and pull some of this stuff up. So like I said, all of this is going to be off the cuff, and it's just talking about what's going on in America right now. For those of you guys who are still kind of new to astrology, we will be talking about the specific natals, okay? So the chart in itself is consciousness. So when I bring up a president's chart, that's his natal chart. When I bring up, you know, the United States chart, that's the United States chart. And when I throw planets over it, which will be the outer wheel, I'll show you in a second, that is the transiting planets and how it's affecting things right now. We are going to take a look at some progress charts. So essentially these are the progressions of if the planets were to move in their, you know, in their motion. Roughly for some planets, it's about like the sun, a degree a year, while other planets in the natal charts move very slowly. So try to kind of stay with me. Look at my highlighter. It's just like blowing back in my face. Tried to look awake for you guys today. All right, so let's go ahead and pull this up. Let's start with, obviously, America's chart. And this is the birth chart that everybody knows very well. This is the July 4th, 1776 chart. So let me grab this, and I'm going to switch my screen over so you guys can see it. Let's see. Okay. And I think there's a bit of a lag, but that's okay. It's not a big deal. All right, so share this with you guys. Okay, so here's America's chart. Okay, and there we go. Hopefully you guys can see that. So we've got that rising Sagittarius, 12 degrees, and we've got the sun. I could probably make this a little bit bigger, but there we go. We've got the sun that's sitting 13 degrees of Cancer, and you guys can kind of take a look at that. And so those of you guys who are more conscious and aware of what's going on astrologically, this is beginning to get very colorful, partially because America is getting ready to experience its Pluto's return, partially because we have all of these planets that are sitting in Cancer natally, and we have a lot of action right now happening in Capricorn. And so that's a huge theme right now. It's almost kind of like, if you've seen my other videos, and there's many other people out there who are talking about this, we're discussing, you know, what's going to happen from 2018 to 2020 when Saturn and Pluto meet up and the South Node moves into Capricorn. And I try to be like a silver lining perspective astrologer. I really do. However, looking at this chart, this kind of makes me feel like 2018 is the beginning of the end. And I don't mean that in a very apocalyptic way. I mean in a way of how we have experienced the United States thus far is going to change drastically in the next 2.5 years moving forward. So brace yourselves. I'm gonna throw on, oh my goodness, I have so many. I'm gonna throw on the transiting planets now. So there we go. So the outer wheel, as you see it, there we go. The outer wheel, as you see it, and all of these planets are how they are aspecting America's birth chart. So let's just take a look at what's going on down here first. We have Pluto sitting stationed. It's going retrograde, actually. And as of today and tomorrow, it's conjunct with Mars. And it's getting increasingly and alarmingly close, okay? Very, very close to the natal Pluto. So that's sitting in the second house. So from my perspective, it's really talking about America's security, our job markets. It's talking about our finances, and realistically, what is going to be changing moving forward from a financial standpoint. Now, if you've seen some of my other videos, I've also been discussing the fact that Uranus is getting ready to enter into Taurus, okay? So it's sitting right here, right on the cusp, getting ready to move into the fifth house, which still, once again, Taurus relates very much back to our security. In astrology, the fifth house can relate to children, creativity, the ego, but also it's very much a solar house. And so when we're looking at transits going through the fifth house, we want to look at, you know, Taurus, it traditionally resides in this home, but we also want to go and look at the sun. And so as Uranus is going into Taurus, it's building into quite a significant square with our Venus and our Jupiter, and in some time, several years, it'll be the sun. So our vitality as a nation is really what I think is being rattled here. And we've seen this recently in the markets. We've seen the markets flop all over the place, depending on, you know, what comments, you know, Trump is making in the media, how he is in or out of a particular trade deal, how he is slapping back other countries with tariffs. And so this rattles the stock market. And my advice would be to anybody who's having some significant concerns about their finances, you really want to take a look at where Capricorn is in your chart. You want to take a look at where Taurus is in your chart. The people who are like the Pluto and Virgo generations, the people who have those conjunctions, who are like maybe somewhere around their, you know, 40s or going into their 50s, you may especially benefit from going and getting an astrological reading, because these are the people who are going to have a lot of aspects to their Plutos or to other personal planets in Virgo. And also, it's just if you're investing a lot of money into the stock market, it's like you may want to double and triple check and connect with a couple people, because, like, I don't want to scare you guys, but I've talked about this in previous videos that the markets are going to be all over the place. And I have predicted that you're going to see a bit of a shakeup when Uranus enters in May and begins to make some squares, but you're going to see another one in 2019. Anyway, I'll save that for a later video, but I'm more concerned about what's going on right here, okay? So Mars and Pluto getting ready to build into a conjunction. What we will be seeing in the weeks ahead is that Uranus going into Taurus is going to be at odds with the South Node, okay? And so they're going to be squaring each other. So let me move ahead in time and let me show you what I'm talking about. So I believe it's like the 15th that Uranus goes into Taurus. And here it is with Mercury. So there's going to be a message, or there's going to be something very unpredictable, very unexpected. And it's going to square off with the South Node, which is like something about the American markets is going to come out, and it's going to be unsettling. Now, on a global scale, this can also be that there are changes in global currency, which then affects the American dollar, or if other countries are basing their currency off of us, which then affects them, which then affects the entire market. But I see this as kind of like an even bigger picture, where so much of our money and so much of our, it's kind of based on our good word. It's like, you can trust us, we're America. But I think that what we're quickly realizing is that this may be like an emperor has no clothes situation. We have an insane amount of debt, not just in terms of our national debt, but also other countries that are also covering our ass in debt and kind of backing us up should we need any help. And that's just a whole other video in itself. But what I'm looking at here is, especially coming in May, okay, we're going to see that these Mercury-Uranus squares, and then especially when Mars shows up. So, oops, sorry. When I'm looking to next month, when Mars shows up, it's going to follow very closely. So now we're at the end of May. It's going to follow very closely with the South Node. And, in June, Mars is going to go retrograde. So it's going to move all the way up to a particular degree. So here we go. So now we're moving into June. And it looks like it's going to go retrograde right about there, the 27th. And so it's going to be still in this pretty tight square, to Uranus. It's within Mars is within an 8 degrees, but still Uranus is within a 5 degrees. And then it's going to go retrograde. So what does this mean? Aquarius relates specifically to the government and how the government is run, and these particular governing parties being our country. And as it goes retrograde, it's going to begin to find itself making some aspects, specifically, Aquarius rules the 11th house. So we look at the 11th house, here's Saturn, making some opportunities to play nicely with Saturn. But really what I think is going to happen is that we're going to see a lot of changes in the legal system. There's going to be a lot of legal issues that are going to come up. There's going to be a lot of arguments about what we should be passing about the budgets. There's going to be a lot of comments that are going to come up about how the markets are fluctuating and changing. If you guys think back to when the housing market crashed, what really happened was then they started putting a whole lot of, consciously I don't get the impression actual loss or and have a better idea of, you know, how our money is being spent, where things are going, things like that. Mercury, it's the Mercury squares to Saturn. Let me know if you guys can still hear me. Okay. Hopefully you guys can hear me. But yeah, so we want to watch, and kind of, as much as a lot of other people have said, you know, watch where the money is going. Like, where is the money going? Okay, good. So back to the chart. So I want you guys to take a really close look at what I'm talking about here, because, you know, Mars will be going retrograde for quite a while. I mean, it's going to be conjunct, especially in July, for some time. And while it's in this hot spot of really discussing and talking about our political security, our consistency, our funding, where the money is coming from, it's also making all of these really nasty, you know, oppositions in Leo. And so what it's really bringing up is the theme of what has come up specifically with the eclipses. I mean, just since the eclipse of last year alone, it's become insanity how much political scandal has come about. So the other thing that I'm kind of looking at that makes me wonder is, you know, the 7th house and the 10th house are very much associated with fame, or very much associated with, you know, being seen in the public eye. And you see this Venus, Jupiter, Sun as, you know, our relationships to other people, as we love our country and we love the motherland and everything's amazing and everything's great. But with Saturn making some oppositions to our Venus and our Jupiter, it almost makes me wonder if everything that has happened since Saturn and Sag, so I should probably back up and talk about, you know, what was happening last year, when we began to really have some not so great interactions with other countries. Just watching any of the United Nations, you know, recordings and the live sessions and anything alone, you can see how much our president has, more so recently in the past few months, put us kind of in a corner. You know, pulling out of national trade deals, not necessarily participating in ways that we can be saving the planet. There's a lot going on. And even recently, you know, we've got, you know, the president of France that's visiting and spending time. And, you know, I got to commend him, because it's very evident that he is a very emotionally intelligent man, and that he realizes that, you know, beating up Trump is not necessarily the way to get him to play nicely. Really what he's doing is going and spending time with him and reiterating his importance in, you know, unity and staying in the Iran deal, and, you know, caring more about the environment. And so they're having these conversations where I genuinely do think that there is some opportunity to mend fences with other countries. But I'm also looking at this and going, now that Saturn's going retrograde here, and it begins to make some oppositions once again to our Venus and our Jupiter, we may not be getting along as well. If you look at what's been happening in North Korea, and that they have been going back and forth and trying to denuclearize what's going on in that country, it kind of built up to this point where everybody thought it was going to happen, and now it kind of almost seems like it's fizzling out, and that they may not necessarily be making quite the headway that we thought that we were going to be making. So I want you guys to watch what's happening over the next couple months, because I feel like Saturn is really kind of a bugger, and he's in a way alienating us from other people and limiting our ability to be able to really connect in the way that we want to be connecting. All right. So Mars and the South Node are going to continue to flow through the second house. And so it's going to really put the pressure, especially with the nodes in Leo, especially with Uranus now in Taurus, especially with Jupiter in Scorpio. And so it's all of these points in fixed signs, creating some subtle squares. Not all 4 points are going to be involved, but certainly creating some situations where whatever is being dug up in the government is going to significantly impact legislation moving forward. Also, a lot of it has to do with where this funding is coming from. And so you've seen like things like the Koch brothers and other people who are, wanting to dump tons of money into the next elections. And you've got a lot of this kind of like wealth imbalance that's still happening. And Jupiter in Scorpio is doing an awesome job. It's highlighting and showing where the money is coming from. And so there will be more discussions about this, about, was Trump working with other entities to pay people off? Was there money accepted from other countries in order to, have this particular presidency do their bidding? You're going to see a lot more come up very soon. And so that's what's, I think, the most interesting thing about this. All right. So moving on to like the next, couple years ahead. As we move in time, I've kind of narrowed down some of my predictions, and I'll actually, you know what? I'll wait to the end to give it to you guys. But I've narrowed down based off of looking at this chart and Trump's progress chart to where I think we're going to begin to see some progress happening in, what's happening with Trump's current standings, and whether or not, the Mueller investigation is going to move forward, and if he is going to have to deal with charges. I mean, in a lot of ways, the astrology just sets up the themes. It doesn't necessarily, in all cases, promise that there is going to be an impeachment or, be a special election or anything. I mean, like I said, there is going to be a few different ways that this can go, but I have kind of narrowed down a couple timelines where I think things are going to get more interesting. So I want to move ahead in this chart, and I want to talk about what's happening more so in the fall. Okay, so this is really where I wanted to get into things. So more so, I believe we're going to see a lot more coming out in November. And those of you guys who know, we're going to be having the elections in the fall, and there's a big talk about whether or not the Republicans are going to be able to preserve their placement, and if the Democrats are going to take the House, and if they take the House, what's going to happen? Well, it doesn't take an astrologer or a rocket scientist or anybody else to figure out if the Democrats were to take the House. And I don't know. It is possible, but still then you need cooperation with, other parties to be able to pursue impeachment. The fact of the matter is I want to stick primarily to the astrology. And I'm looking in November when the Sun and Jupiter and Mercury are moving through the 12th house of hidden secrets. I'm looking at when the South Node is now conjunct America's Pluto. I'm looking at now when the North Node is making its way and technically kind of conjunct America's Mercury. That's when I believe you're going to see a lot more coming out in terms of hard facts about what was hidden and what financial dealings were hidden and what was really going on behind closed doors. If, I would tell most of you guys, if you have the time at some point, go and watch my inauguration video, because even at the time, I didn't really realize how significant some of the statements I was making were and how much of an impact it would actually end up making. And I'm not talking about on the presidency. I'm talking about in a sense of, I spoke a lot about his chart, and I'll show it to you guys again, but a lot of it came down to his dealings behind closed doors, and that those deals that he made behind closed doors and what he kept secret, and people who would eventually roll over on him, that was what would really do him in. And now we're seeing all of these people who have been indicted, with the exception of, I think, one that's pleading innocent. Everybody else is pleading guilty. So I don't necessarily know if this is a witch hunt. What I think may have potentially happened, and we'll get into this later, was that there was interferences, and I'm trying to be really careful with my words here. I think that there were interferences with potentially both of the potential political candidates. Can I say that? I'm going to say that. And I believe that it's possible that Trump, in a way, had other people do his biddings. And that comes up in his chart too. So I'll talk about that. So do I think that Trump necessarily set out to go and collude? No, I don't think that at all. I think that it was just a series of some very divine events. And as much as I don't like saying that, I'll show you guys some presidential charts that are going to probably give you a good chuckle. For some reason, my chat is not moving, so I'm hoping that you guys are still around. Maybe everybody's just patiently listening. All right, so moving on. So yes, in the fall, we see this situation where topics come to light that have not necessarily come to light until then. Or maybe there are more hardcore facts that are showing up. You also see the fact that, Uranus has gone retrograde back again into the fourth house, which can represent, Uranus 29 degrees, bringing out the most intense point of that sign. Are we potentially at odds once again with other countries? Uranus in 29 degrees of Aries, to me, and especially recently throughout this past year, we've seen a lot of issues with missiles and rockets and dropping things and warfare. So it's like, man, there is potential for this to still happen. And I do think that there is going to, unfortunately, be a lot more of these situations going on our own grounds. Now, I'm not trying to start some conversation that's saying we're going to be attacked. What I'm saying is the issues we've had recently with gun control, with people who are spiraling out of control and doing some very hostile and very scary things in the United States, these Americans, I think you're going to see more of that. And it's unfortunate, but in my last video, I talked about this is such a significant time astrologically with the Pluto-Mars conjunction squaring Uranus that you're going to see people acting in very combative ways. But the purpose here is to be able to tune us in as a country and stand up to the government, or stand up to, the people who are governing us. And it's not a situation where it's just going to happen overnight. I'm gonna get into some other stuff here really quick. Let me finish this up, and then I want to talk about particular generations at hand. But so the end of the year, Jupiter is crossing our ascendant. Mercury is currently sitting smack dab on our ascendant. So obviously there's some kind of attention that's being brought to the United States. We are being seen significantly by the world at this point. And I think that there's going to be a lot more happening in terms of, well, now that the light's on us, now we really have to make some changes. Keep in mind also that Saturn is building into a square. Okay, it's already opposing Jupiter at this point, and it's building into a square with Saturn. So watch what's going on here in the second house as we move forward. So we have December, January, and January is the month that I want to talk about. So we've got the Sun, the South Node, Mercury, and Pluto. At this point, Pluto does appear to be at 21 degrees, so it's moving forward again. But this is going to highlight a lot of the things that are going on during the South Node Mars. It's like if there are significant things that are being brought up in government this month and next month, I think the solar energy is just showing us where it's going to begin to start making some changes the beginning of 2019. Now, South Node represents, karma, or events that need to be happening to be able to rebalance everything. The North Node in Cancer is sitting still, once again, conjunct our Mercury, and it's getting very, very close to our point of fortune. In fact, it's sitting on it. So what is my interpretation of this? I think that financially, we most likely will go belly up. I think that we are going to hit a plateau or a wall that's going to slow us down, and that's really when we can no longer pass the buck in terms of what's going on with the US budget. I think at the same time, all of these planets making squares to Uranus and making squares to Cancer is also an indication that financially it is going to be extremely difficult if there were to be any potential acts of war. Now, I'm hoping that that's not the case. Here comes Mars getting ready to become conjunct Uranus in the following month, okay? And that's something else that's interesting here, because that doesn't necessarily mean that there's physically a change in the house, but the fact that it's making some very hard squares to Pluto in the South Node indicate that there is a significant change in government and things that are really shifting, that are requiring us to bring out information. We can't hide information. There could be somebody that could be leaving the White House. I don't think that it's like a specific time that this is going to happen. I get the impression, and I'll look at Trump's chart in a second, that really if he were to leave, or if he were to be facing any charges, or if he were to be impeached, I don't necessarily think it would happen until spring of 2019. And even then, that doesn't necessarily fix anything. Like, that's what I'm saying. I hear so many people that are like, oh, just impeach him. Then we have Pence, and, that's not going to fix democracy. And the fact is that this is a very significant point in history that's showing us where corruption is ruining our country, where big business is muscling out people who are living in situations where they can't run their own businesses, where, big, massive companies are potentially pushing people into poverty. And so you're gonna see some very intense things happening spring of 2019. So moving forward, even then some, this is significant because we've got this Pluto-Saturn conjunction, which is particularly gnarly. And it really, really begins to heat up more than ever before, I believe, in like March, April. Partially because we're having a Mars return, partially because you're going to start to see that there's going to be some even more significant oppositions. Uranus moves back into a point where now it's building into even more of a square. I mean, it's just like, all of it has to do with this imbalance of wealth in America and how we have potentially elected a president that is the poster child, quote unquote, of the American dream. We have reality shows, we have, this person who has acquired a lot of wealth and a lot of money, and people see him as very powerful. But do we have somebody in power who Americans can relate to? That's the question. And I think that this is when perhaps financial situations become unveiled. And we're seeing it now because there's things coming out in media, whether or not it's true, about how wealthy is Trump. Did he really build towers and not pay people? You know, go back and do your research, guys. Go and look into when he was building Trump Towers and then went default on stuff and, you know, didn't pay some of the workers and how that played out. So it's this kind of American theme where we have the big house and we have the car and we have this and we have that and we have everything and we have this very wealthy lifestyle. But the truth is that most of us are fucking living on credit. And when these planets move into the 2nd and the 8th axis, it has a lot to do with the health of our country and, you know, a rebalancing of sorts of, you know, what we really have versus, you know, what we have in a bank account or what we have on a credit card. And so, unfortunately, I think a lot of things have to be leveled. And the more that I started looking at this, I actually have a little bit of hope. And I want to talk about the Pluto in Sag generation. So let me switch back so you guys can. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the Pluto signs versus the Aquarian signs. So we've got like the Pluto in Leo generation. So this is like everybody from 1940 to about 1959. Okay. And these are the people who have the Pluto in Leo. Then we have the people who have Pluto in Uranus, which is 1956 to 1963. And what you're seeing with these eclipses and with the nodes is that it's highlighting this area or these particular souls or these particular groups of people. This is not me saying or playing the blame game and saying, oh, it's all their fault, because no, that's not the case. But when we think of Pluto, Pluto is what ultimately consumes and destroys and has to change and has to shift. And when we think of Leo, it's very much based on the ego. It's the king. It's the nice things. It's the robes. It's the gold. It's the jewelry. It's the big house. So they came from the Pluto and Cancer generation. So they came from the Susie homemaker, dad goes to work, mom stays at home type of generation. And they shifted because of their astrological placements into Pluto and Leo. It's about me. It's about what I have. And when I think about that, I'm like, oh my God, that's Trump. Like, it's very much sometimes an entitlement. And like some of you guys have the opportunity and have superseded this, because if you think back to what was happening to you in like 1998, 1999, there were similar eclipses going on then that there are now. So if you're dealing with similar themes, for some of you guys, it's financial issues. For other people, it's health issues. For others, it's relationship issues. But wherever these eclipses are hitting, it specifically relates to the sun or the solar or the lunar eclipse lighting it up and being like, whoa, we're going to ego check you really quick and make sure that you are doing the evolutionary work to evolve past the ego. So my mind started kind of turning, and this is when I started pulling up a bunch of different charts for a bunch of different presidents, and I found some rather interesting and alarming things. Going back to this generation though, so you guys are getting hit pretty hard because the North Node in some way or another has recently, because it's been moving through Leo since like last year, has made aspects and become conjunct with those planets. So it's highlighting the sun, you know, the North Node is, look at it, and Leo is solar, so it's highlighting and showing all of these issues out in the world. So it's becoming a lot more evident. So anyone who has these placements, I believe, are having a particularly challenging time because Jupiter's in Scorpio, it's squaring those planets. We have the South Node that's making oppositions to your planets. So it's really kind of saying to you, we're going to keep checking you over and over and over. And then you also have Uranus that's now going into Taurus. So the truth is that this line of this type of ruling, of this type of regal, entitled mentality is dying. Like, I don't believe that we're going to have a bunch of future presidents that are millionaires and billionaires. I don't think that's going to happen. And I do not think that the Pluto and Sag generation is going to let you guys get away with that shit. Now, here's something else that I started kind of putting together. These other generations I find particularly interesting. So we've got those who have the north nodes in Aquarius, okay? So you can go back in time. So it's like the last time that we had, I think the Aquarian, so we have Aquarian north nodes in 1989. And then we also have, yeah, I'd have to do the math in my head. I'd have to sit down and look at it. But 1989, I know that because that's my north node. But if you have a north node in Aquarius, somehow you play a role in helping shift the paradigm of what's going on with all of these planets in Leo. If you have Capricorn, Saturn in Capricorn, you play a role in helping rebuild the financial structures or rebuilding security, because it sits directly on top of all of these planets in the second house of America's chart. So it's kind of like, and I've said this in past videos, people who are having their second Saturn's return right now are like the teachers for people who are my age, who are 27 to like 30. And then if you've got stellium in Capricorn, this is especially important because I feel like you have the capabilities of rolling up your sleeves and doing all the heavy work. And we aren't even going to get the recognition, and that's totally fine. I don't care about that. But we are clearing things and preparing things for the generation of the kids who have Saturn in Aquarius, and the generation of the kids who have Pluto in Sagittarius. So those of you guys who have Saturn in Aquarius, that's from 1991 to 1993. Especially 1993, because they have Jupiter in Leo, and they are illuminating all of these issues at hand right now. You know, they're learning, they're paying attention, perhaps maybe they're getting more involved in education and what's going on with government structures. And they may even be teachers. I think we're going to see a lot of future politicians from this particular group, because that Saturn in Aquarius and Pluto in Sag is just like, they aren't going to be like the groups that have come before us. They are going to be the ones who are going to roll up their sleeves, and they are going to go into the underdeveloped, the impoverished areas. They are going to be fighting for immigration. They are going to welcome people back into America. They are not going to be tolerating racism. They are not going to be having an over expenditure of wealth. They are not going to tolerate having, religion infused into government. I think you're going to see that there will finally be a separation of state and church. The 1995 generation I find particularly interesting. These people can be very intense. They have Pluto in Sag. And I like the 1996 kids because they also have Uranus in Aquarius. They have a south node. They're having a south node transit with Uranus in Aquarius right now. So there's that. Okay, so that was just like a lot of notes, but basically these are a lot of the people who are also like rioting. We're seeing like the walkouts and the kids who are walking out, and they're getting angry about gun controls. They're getting angry about the funding. I saw recently in the news, I'm actually from Tucson, there's a bunch of teacher walkouts that are happening. And so it's interesting that this is all revolving around education, students, student funding, teacher funding, schools. And I think that this is the beginning of Uranus going into Taurus and starting to build into squares with those kids who were born in the mid 90s. So essentially it's like the 60s all over again. You know, those of you guys who have those planets in those conjunctions in Virgo, or if you remember the late 60s and the riots and everything that was going on, we're still dealing with racism. We're still dealing with lots of problems with people not being willing to serve certain people in certain restaurants and making racial slurs. It's like history repeats itself. And so the conclusion that I've kind of come to with astrology is that this is the study of the stars, yes, and we infuse it with mythology, and we infuse it with other archetypes and personality types, and we can predict things. But really, you know, astrology is the study of patterns. And so these patterns are coming back. And so that's why I especially love the people who were born in the late 60s, like anywhere from like 67 to 72. I'm getting a lot of these clients because I feel like that rebelliousness is coming back out of them right now, and they're starting to really kind of feel themselves with Pluto and Saturn making aspects to their natal Pluto or their natal Uranus. And I think that you guys are key because you will help lead the future into creating new government structures in a very positive way. Because you were born during the time of the, sexual revolution. You were born during the time of women really entering into the workplace. You have a lot in you astrologically that can help pave the way for some of these new kids. And seeing stuff that's coming up about kids wanting to change the voting age and wanting to have more of a say in regards to votes. And I think that you're going to see, as Jupiter goes into Pluto, as Jupiter goes into Sag in the fall and spends a year transiting all of these kids that have Pluto and Sag, what they're capable of. I don't think you understand what they're capable of. They also, I believe, are going to play a huge role in being able to make some changes in regards to education. I mean, you see in America, you've got people who are just drowning in debt because they went to get a bachelor's degree or they went to get a master's degree. And there are people who are all the way up into their 30s and even then some that are having roommates and find it really difficult to be able to live on their own because they're so bogged down with debt. So I think the other thing that's going to come from this generation is that they are going to challenge the status quo of how we go about education, whether or not education is going to become something that is for everyone, that is a right for everyone. And I'm not just talking about high school, I'm talking about college and then on. If you take a look at what's happened in New York State, and there's been some stuff that's come out in regards to if you make under a certain amount of money a year, then you're entitled to go to college or like a state or a city college pretty much for free, as long as you meet the requirements. Take a look at other countries and how they're treating education, and that for the most part, I'm not saying private colleges, but that they have government arranged education programs so you can go to school for little to nothing, and that you're not coming out of college drowning in debt. So I think that the United States is going to have a complete reboot financially altogether, and that many people who have made the decision to go and get education while it's important are going to see that there's going to be a lot of changes moving forward where we aren't putting our kids in a situation where they're graduating or they're coming out of school with $100,000 in debt. And I'm hoping that that is the case, because maybe it's just me and my perspective, but I think that if we made education free or very affordable, you've got a bunch of people that are going to go to school for what they want to go to school for. You're not going to have people that want to go to school just to become, an attorney or to become a lawyer. Or a doctor or anything like that, just because they want to make money. I think you're going to see people going to school for things that they generally want to do. I think you're going to see a lot more funding and opportunities go into trade and trade schools, and that there's going to be also some changes in that. I mean, I feel like I was just reading an article yesterday that was saying because for pretty much the past, 15, 20 years, we as a culture have been pushing, go and get a bachelor's degree, go and get a bachelor's degree. Now there is a shortage of a whole bunch of positions in trade occupations. We're going to need welders, we're going to need people who are going to be nurses, and we're going to need so many different types of things, because I feel like the United States financially will change as a whole, that you'll see more nurses than you will doctors, that you'll see a lot more paralegals than you will see attorneys, and we're going to start seeing people who are coming in and really focusing more on what they can specialize and how they can serve their communities, because I just have so many notes here. I'm sorry, guys. It's just kind of insane. So one of the other things that I was looking into today also was that there's been a lot of talk here in California about California and Cal exit, and pretty much California just being fed up and ready to go. There's been a lot of drama because there are sanctuary cities here that there has been a lot of conflict with, especially with the president, while he's trying to initiate all of these changes in immigration. But, I live in LA. Like, I don't know if we're going to stop that. And I do believe that we need some sort of middle ground. And I think we need to, sorry, I'm like looking at my phone. My phone's going off. We need to find a middle ground. And California is talking about succeeding from the union. This has kind of come up back and forth, but what's funny, it's like 2 years ago, I was saying, you guys don't get it. Part of what's going to happen in 2020 is that we're going to begin to start to see the actual United States start to kind of break off. And I think that particular states will choose to succeed. California has like the 6th largest economy in the world. So I don't really get the impression that the United States would want to let them go. But at the same time, we're seeing stuff that's coming up where in the 2020, I believe, ballots, we're going to start voting on whether or not we are going to break up California, and we're going to separate the more urban parts of California from the more rural parts of California. And there will be a new California, and California is all going to be divided. And I went, oh my God, it's happening. Like, this is really happening. And I'll pull up Arizona's chart in a second. Arizona, California. And I want to show you the chart because it's very significant to this impending full moon that's coming on the 29th. In fact, it's like conjunct a whole bunch of things for California. So California is a huge place that you want to be watching here soon. Not just because of the full moon, but because there will be squares between Mars and the nodes and Uranus to the ascendant. So I'm predicting earthquakes. I think that there is going to be some real eyes on California in the next several weeks. Okay, haven't even gotten through half the stuff I want to get through yet. Part of what I was also talking about and discussing was, the Pluto return and moving into 2019 and 2020 in the state's chart, and essentially that this energy, people don't live to have a Pluto return because it's like 270 odd years or something. So we are seeing that the United States essentially, I believe, very slowly but surely is going through a revolution. And this energy is starting now, but I think it's really not going to come to a head until closer to 2020 and maybe even to 2021, when Saturn is moving into Aquarius, and it's really giving us the solid ground that we need to really start making changes in our government and also in how it's being run. I have a theory, and I've kind of seen bits and pieces of the United States breaking up into pieces and becoming almost kind of like, it's hard to explain. It's almost going to be like they're going to be their own separate territories. I also saw that there is going to be, what else did I see? I think there's a new branch of like legislation that's coming. So I don't think it's going to be just Democrats and Republicans or independents, but I love independents, but you guys don't get, voted in. But I think that they are going to potentially introduce a new branch. And so it may not necessarily just be, okay, we've voted in a Republican president or we've voted in a Democratic president. I think that they are going to create something different. And I know that we have the Senate and I know that we have the House, but it may be that that is the third aspect that comes in. But I think we're moving away from a sole ruling party or one ruling president. I think that this is going to be something very significant that you're going to see happen probably within like the next 6 years. I don't think it's going to happen immediately, but I very much do believe that it had to be Trump. Okay, so here's what I wanted to get to, because I was talking about some stuff in a previous video and I gave you guys some teasers. I've got like so many notes here. So let's talk about other presidents, okay? And I just want to just give you guys a list so just you can marinate on this for a second. You may not remember all of it, but I started looking at all of the different presidential charts. And it started with me first looking at Trump's chart, and then it spiraled into me looking at both of the Bush's chart and Obama's chart and Clinton's chart. And there were some striking similarities in some of these degrees, and the same degrees keep coming up. The first degree that I see the most is 26 degrees of Leo, okay? Give or take. For the most part, it is specifically 26 degrees, but I do see that Obama has some placements between 25 and 27, so that's still a very tight conjunction. But yeah, so 26 degrees of Leo, so that's Trump's Mars, and I'll pull up his chart. That's both of the Bushes, Bush Senior and Junior. It's both of their ascendant. And that's Bill Clinton's son. Okay, so let that just sit in for a second. We had that big eclipse back in August. That was at 28 and change degrees of Leo. Okay, and that eclipse was a doozy. We believe that, eclipses can affect anywhere from 6 months to maybe even a year or two. It just kind of depends. But that was a very significant, very, very strong solar eclipse. So you can expect that anybody who has those particular degrees is experiencing quite a bit of changes. Now, if it's on your ascendant, it's bringing the attention to you, and you really want to look at their sun, not just their ascendant. If it's happening on their Mars, it's about their reactionary responses, their physical body, acts of war, what they're doing, what they're working on. If it's the sun, it's even more intense because it's really impacting their solar energy, their ability to do something. Now, I haven't seen any other astrologers do this yet, so I'm going to say this here now. This is my information. If you see this, you're more than welcome to discuss it, to write about it, whatever. I just ask that you give me some credit because I haven't seen other people talking about this yet. Okay, so let me go and pull up Trump's chart. But what I wanted to say first is that since this eclipse, okay, we have seen so much drama with Trump. We see that George W. Bush, all the attention has been brought to him recently because his mother passed away. His father, same ascendant, was just recently taken into the hospital for medical issues. And we see that Bill Clinton comes back into the news because just recently, around the 17th of April, they are deciding to unseal 11 court files that relate to the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Hello? Okay, so then I started kind of like putting the pieces together, and I'm like, holy cow, they're all being affected by the eclipse. Okay, so let's go and look at the chart. But the other degrees that I brought up that were particularly interesting was 10 or 11 degrees of Leo. And that's more generationally with the Pluto and Leo generation. So that's not that big of a deal as some of the other ones that I brought up. 20 to 22 degrees of Gemini. That's Trump's son, Bush Sr.'s son, and Bill's Uranus. So you kind of get what I'm kind of like building up on here. Like all of these presidents, current and past, have had quite a bit of aspects since last summer. Whether it was Saturn opposing the planets in Gemini, whether it was, Uranus trining the planets in Leo. Now it's more recently been the eclipses igniting these planets in Leo. So that's why all of these people, all of these men are being brought in front and center. And I just had this hunch that was like, there's something connected here. Now, if we go back in time to when Bill Clinton had his issue with Monica Lewinsky, I have these specific notes, but I believe it was like the affair went on from 1995 to 1997, but it didn't really start coming out into light, and there wasn't anything really significant that started happening until, I think it was 1998. I have the specific dates. I'll show it to you guys. But that's a big piece of this puzzle because I see some similarities going on with Trump and Trump's presidency and how things are playing out from the eclipses with Trump and exactly what happened to President Clinton. We see talks about impeachment. We see sex scandals. We see things that were hidden. And more recently, whether it's true or not, I saw something come up in the news that was talking about Michael Cohen relaying information to Trump about supposedly an illegitimate son coming forward of a mixed race that claims that Bill Clinton was his father. And I couldn't help but just wonder, like what are they hiding? Like, what are the eclipses bringing up? Like Pluto, okay? Pluto and Leo, sex, obsession, sexual egos, where we are doing things sexually because we're fulfilling our egos. And I think that everything is now coming to light. And I don't necessarily know if it's going to be Trump's dishonesty that may affect him in the long run. I think that I'll take that back. I mean, there is dishonesty, but I don't really think that I think he's going to get a slap on the wrist for the financial stuff. I think what's really coming out and what's really getting him is a lot of what's happening in regards to his relationships with women and whether or not, financial transactions happened that were a part of the campaign and it being connected to sexually related issues with women. So let's go and let's jump back into the charts. I want to pull up Trump's chart. And we'll look at Trump's chart and then we will look at Trump's progress chart. So give me 1 second. And I don't really feel the need to go back over, all of the stuff with the inauguration chart. It's just going to be such a long video. So if you guys, I'll put the link afterwards, but it's on Astrology's channel. So even if you type in Trump astrology, you'll see it. But a lot of the stuff that I spoke about, I'll be referencing here. Okay, so let's go to Trump's chart. Okay. So here we go. Just so you guys know, all the information that I'm pulling from like the Astro data bank. So this is all information that you guys can go and get. You can go and get this specifically online if you check their chart section out. Okay, so here we go. So we see that Mr. Trump has a 29 degrees Leo rising. There's that Mars that I was talking about. There's that Sun, North Node, Uranus in the 10th house. South Node, Moon. Okay, so let's look at what Trump's got going on now. I don't want to talk about too much in the past because, like I said, it'll just turn into a very, very long video. But essentially, my eyes pop because the eclipse that we had back in August was right on his ascendant, but it was conjunct his Mars. And one of the things that I spoke about was that he has to watch out for unexpected attacks. Now, I don't necessarily mean that in a physical way, okay? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who are doing things behind his back. And it also mirrors into the things that he's doing behind closed doors. If you see this is a trine, it's a loose trine, but that Mars, making trines to the South Node Moon is kind of an indication that he's got something to hide. He's hiding something, whether he's hiding at Mar-a-Lago, wherever, in Florida with his golfing, or he's hiding behind, business dealings and things that he's doing at the White House. More so recently, it came out that he's opting to use his personal phone more than using phones that are associated with his presidential line. But take a look at what's going on here, okay? This North Node is making its way to his natal Pluto. And so that's the biggest thing that I've been watching and I've been waiting for. And if I move ahead in time, the North Node actually is going to be right on top of his Pluto, okay? Pretty much as of the 27th. Now it's conjunct now, so you're feeling it now. But I want you guys to pay close attention to this because the Pluto in the 12th house is what we need to finish up in this lifetime, or what intensity or what we do that's very plutonic behind closed doors. This is also significant because it's very much connected to his mental emotional state of mind, okay? It also relates to what's happening with his sun. So we want to look at the 5th house because that's the solar house, and then we want to look at the actual placement of his sun. So thankfully, Venus is in Gemini, and Venus is actually going to be making some nice aspects to Mars at some point here soon, and some very nice aspects to the South Node. So Venus does protect. So I don't think you're going to see anything crazy happen right now. But I do believe that once that North Node becomes conjunct with his Pluto, it's in a way kind of sealing the fate for the beginning of, everything coming out. And this is more important, especially because the full moon that's coming on the 29th is going to be happening. Give me just a second. It's at 9 degrees. So somewhere around here. And it's going to create a T-square. Okay, so here we go. So the full moon, and it's a full moon in Scorpio, which is huge because it illuminates something. It's going to create a T-square between his Pluto and the transiting sun. Okay, not to mention the fact that it's igniting a fixed cross with the South Node. So something in regards to the health of the president, something in regards to his ability to be capable of doing the work that he needs to do. The sun illuminating the ninth house, which also has to do with his relationships with other people, his relationships with other countries, our financial dealings with other countries, and how he's communicating to people. What I predict is going to be happening soon with Trump is the North Node on his Pluto is going to send him into a spiral. I think that you may see that he reneges on some of his agreements with other countries. You may see that there is a sense about him where he is a little bit more aggressive than usual, and it will be very unexpected. I don't think I'm completely convinced that he is going to stay in any way, shape, or form in long-term contact with North Korea. I just don't think that deal is going to go through. And frankly, with these transits, I don't really feel that it's very safe for him to be going and traveling and meeting with somebody of that nature. I would send somebody else to do it. And if he's trying or opting to do some of this in private, which is possible, I still don't think that's a good idea. And this would be a time that I would be especially conscious and aware of my health if I were him, and also who I can and cannot trust. The other thing that's kind of coming up here for me is that, like I said, you're going to see something very platonic about him come across. And a lot of this is also because he is seeing that Uranus is making some trines to Mars and making some trines to his South Node moon. So there's going to be an emotional fluctuation and there's going to be a change. We've already kind of seen him go back and forth, but I feel like this may be a time where if he's feeling like he's getting his back up against a wall, he's going to be a lot more reactionary than usual. Now we're also seeing that Pluto, good old Pluto in Capricorn, conjunct Mars, making oppositions to his Saturn and his Venus in Cancer, okay, in the 11th house, which really brings it back to the 4th house. Here's my prediction. I think that one of the things that may potentially do him in are his children or his family. I think that this whole Jared Kushner, this Trump Jr. situation is going to be explosive. And I think I have one of their charts. I might pull it up. Maybe I'll do another video because it's going to be long. But and if any of you guys are lost right now, like I said, Pluto Mars in opposition to his Saturn and his Venus. You know, we've already seen recently he was trying to push Kushner out of the White House. He was trying to get people out of there, him and Ivanka. Is it Ivanka? Yeah. And trying to, you know, kind of be like, you guys got to go. And I think what's happening is that, you know, Pluto cooks situations. It cooks you very slowly until you have so much pressure that you pop. And what's really going on is I think that there is going to be some very significant information that's going to come out about his children and or family and their involvement with other countries. And it could be, you know, that there were trade deals, that there were agreements with other countries in regards to, you know, supply of like military stuff. You're going to see some crazy things come out. And whether or not they were making agreements with other countries, the ninth house, that really benefited themselves. Because look at this, the Saturn Venus, it's no wonder that he's worked in real estate, made his money in real estate. But that Pluto and Mars in opposition is what agreements or business agreements he's made with himself, solar house, or with his children that are ultimately going to potentially screw him. And so that's a really big significant thing. The other thing is the Saturn, Venus in opposition to the Sun Pluto does relate back to his sexual relationships with women and how women are stepping up and women are getting involved and they're trying to put a knife in some things for him and creating quite a bit of conflict here. And so we're seeing it play out also in regards to the relationships of his children. You know, one of his son's wives filed for divorce. You know, we don't know what's going on with Ivanka and Jared Kushner, and quite frankly, I don't really care. But obviously, this is also highlighting his children's relationships and where there are crazy things that are happening that are creating conflict. And so you may see this all across the board. All right, so as we begin to see that Uranus changes signs and it goes into Taurus, it then really, really begins to start making and packing a punch, because Uranus is the ruling planet of government and of the 11th house. So in this case, it relates mostly to, you know, is he going to, you know, solidify relationships with other countries? Is he going to try to make things better? Is it going to become more stable? This relates to the second house. And quite frankly, Saturn's still going to be making squares to his Neptune. So I think that there is a little bit of an elusiveness, and we see this even when you talk to him or when he's making comments in the press. It's like, well, maybe I will, maybe I won't. And so I don't think that he wants a lot of his plans or a lot of his communications with people to be out in the media. I don't feel like he wants people to know what's really going on. And I'll show you that on top of the United States chart in a minute. What I really want you guys to pay attention to is actually going to be later on when planets move into his 12th house. And I kept saying when I was looking at the other chart, I was like, pay attention to what's going on in July. Look what's happening in July. You know, Sun, North Node, Mercury, all of these planets lighting up his 12th house. Yes, they're making trines to his 4th house, but also there are squares now with Uranus, and there is a South Node Mars conjunction, and Mars is tipping back into the 5th house. So more information is going to come up over the summer. My prediction for his chart is I do not believe he is going to be removed, if at all. I'm open-minded, potentially from the White House, or that there begins to be any kind of legal proceedings or anything that would create any changes in his position really until probably about March or April 2019. Remember, simultaneously, this is when the South Node, Pluto, and Saturn are beginning to really get nice and cozy in Capricorn. And I don't think that for President Trump, it's necessarily going to be a situation where it's simply just what has happened and him getting a slap on the wrist. I think that he's got other things coming in regards to his financial stuff. And I think that there are other financial things that are going to come out as we begin to see, planets like Mercury and the Sun aspecting his 8th house, making oppositions to his 2nd house Libra. And, Saturn is very much impacting his Neptune right now. So you're seeing, and now, Saturn's sitting at 8 degrees, but a lot of, the 5th house has to do with speculation. So it's like he could be saying that he has all of this money, or he could be saying that, he hasn't done certain things. And then all of a sudden it'll come out later on that, he has. All right, so look for March, April, even May 2019. That's when I think that potentially there could be some very significant changes. I do want to look at his progress chart because I find that kind of interesting too, because that's a bit of a cool chart to look at. So here's his progress chart as of today. Libra rising, Jupiter, Chiron, Venus, Mars, and Neptune all in his 12th house. So this all relates to his relationships, what relationships he's got behind closed doors, who he is and is not talking to, his 7th house, okay? There's nothing there. However, watch this. Boom. Uranus just entering into President Trump's 7th house, which means there is going to be a wild ride still for about a year and a half in regards to legal situations, especially when it gets into 29 degrees. So I do think that that is a force to be reckoned with. I do feel like there's a lot more that's going to come out about his relationships and what potential legal situations he has gotten himself into as a result of not abiding by the rules. Now, even in this chart, recently, the North Node has hit his Pluto, and right now, his progressed moon is sitting between Pluto and Mercury. So it's kind of like, I look at that and go, oh my God, you know, is he losing his mind? Is he really feeling like it's too much pressure? Is this the end? Is this the beginning of the end of the presidency? Certainly, because the progressed moon moves so slowly, you know, this is next month. It's conjunct his Mercury, and Pluto is still there. But I do think that there's going to be some really big, shocking news that's going to be happening over the next 2 months that will come out in regards to his position. The other thing is that, you know, currently we have all these planets in Capricorn sitting conjunct in his third house, which has to do with his agreements, or it has to do with his way how he communicates. Remember that Saturn is in a square right now with Mercury. So it's whether or not he's being honest, or whether or not, you know, he's being truthful and being held accountable for a lot of what's coming out and what statements he's making. Pay attention to Mars, which is going to go and cross his IC, which is really, I think, questioning how long he's going to be there. And then it goes retrograde. So people will be following up with him, I think, in August, September, October, about things that he's been saying now. And this is a very significant month because we are going to be coming back into eclipses, but the North Node will be conjunct his ascendant, making his way for his Saturn. Okay, and all of this relates because, you know, this is, it had the Sun, Leo, has to do with the 10th house, with whether or not he's fit. So once again, I don't think you're going to see, you know, an insane thing happen immediately. I think that you're going to see over the next couple of months more information come out. My guess is that as the South Node, Pluto, and Saturn show up January 2019 through March, April, that's when there are some really significant changes. And I do think that he's gonna be leaving the White House. Whether or not it's because he goes willingly, I've said all along, I don't think he's the type to do that. But nevertheless, it's something interesting to watch. Now, look at this, guys. I found it really interesting to take a look at what his chart is doing to America's chart. I haven't even really gotten to the Constitution chart, so I'm going to try to do that today. It's a really long video. Sorry for keeping you guys so long. So here we go. So Trump's going to be on the outside, and America, let's see. I'm sorry, Trump, yeah, America's on the inside, Trump's on the outside. So if that makes any sense. So here we have Mars in the 7th house, which can be combative communication. We have his Uranus, North Node, and his Sun. So that, for me, just on a purely astrological level, makes me kind of feel like since last year with the Saturn and Sag oppositions, he was destroying our relationships with other countries, which right now seems like, oh, it's terrible. We don't want to be seen that way. You know, we want to get along with other countries. What's really happening is I think that he is completely and totally uprooting years of past presidential progress of being able to work hand in hand with other countries and combat major topics all across the board. And we potentially may not really start to begin to see the effects and the damage of this for several years. Because if we burn enough bridges when we're really in some dire straits in 2020, we may not have very many people to turn to. And that's my bigger concern, is that that's what he's essentially doing right now. I also see that his Pluto, his Venus, his Saturn lands in the United States 8th house. Taxes, sex, secrets, money, money owed, investments in real estate, Cancer. So this made my eyes get really big because this this eclipse that we had, give me a second, I'm gonna have to pull this up. This eclipse that we had recently in Leo, the last one I think was very close to this degree, which is really what's igniting the Pluto. But also that his Pluto is conjunct the North Node. So he's changing and shifting and doing his Plutonic thing on our ego and our value system. His Venus and his Saturn's conjunct our Mercury retrograde in Cancer. So it's going to come down to his investments. It's going to come down to potentially even the fact that he has not completely stepped away from his own businesses and his own business transactions, even if he is letting his family run it. You know, many presidents will turn all of that stuff over to a blind trust. He didn't. So he still has some kind of involvement. And, you know, I just kind of had a flash of something that also came up for me really quickly was, you know, whether or not he was doing deals in regards to where he could be building things. And I know that there was some people suspected he was potentially trying to build a Trump Tower in Russia. And I think that that may come up again too, if whether or not he was, you know, not being completely honest and keeping people in the dark about what his true intentions were. All right. He's also got this Jupiter Chiron conjunction on America's Saturn, which basically says that in a way, Trump is our teacher. Trump is a lesson. Trump is magnifying the fact that we've got some real issues in regards to our legal system. Okay. And his Jupiter makes an exact trine to his Uranus North Node, which is reinforcing the fact that there sometimes has to be protests and violence and arguments and all kinds of things. It's also showing you why he's in such a legal shit show right now on a number of topics. Let's take a look at, oh, and his Mars, by the way, on America's midheaven. Let's take a look at the composite. Wowzers. So 21 degrees Libra rising. That means Pluto is squaring right now, currently. And we've got the North Node, Venus, Mercury, Chiron conjunction. So what is he doing? What was part of his, you know, what did he create? He created a situation where we have had a bit of conflict with other countries, more specifically foreigners. I think this is going to come a lot down to be honest with you, the Statue of Liberty. You know, welcoming people from other countries, regardless of where they come from, the sick, the poor, the impoverished, to come to America and to buy into the American dream. In some weird, twisted way, I think that Trump is going to allow us to have the America that we want. I just think it's going to take a couple years. North Node and Venus conjunct is having love, learning to be loving and compassionate to ninth house themes, other countries, to foreigners, other belief systems, to welcome them into our home. Unfortunately, we're seeing a very divided America right now. And to be honest with you, I don't think it's going to change anytime soon, but it only takes a little bit of light to illuminate the dark. So essentially what's going on is really what it's coming down to is our relationship with other countries. And if it's going to take this presidency to really isolate ourselves to the point where we have no options, we will have no other options but to love and appreciate and accept immigrants. America will become America again in a very different way. And this may also mean that as a result of this, there are some changes in regards to immigration, which I think is very important. Currently, we're also seeing that, let me put this up. The outside, guys, is the current planets. That Pluto and Mars are hovering around this composite moon, which means the IC is it's a very dark place. The IC is what we keep hidden the most and what we are potentially hiding away or securing or not wanting to show other people. And we also see that it's building into trines with the composite Neptune, which is the health, the mental health. I think that you're going to see more stuff come up about his mental health. And I have to applaud the people who have stepped forward and instead of criticizing Trump have basically gone, this is a prime example of somebody who's having mental health issues. Obviously, Trump needs some help. This isn't putting him down. It's kind of saying, look at the stress and everything that's going on and look at his health, and people want to examine his diet and people want to examine, how he's reacting and how he's treating people and how he lashes out with people. And I think that this is kind of showing you that when you back somebody into a corner, they can be a little bit unbalanced. And so we have a lot of talks going on where, in the recent past couple of months, all different types of people have stepped in and kind of posed the question that they're concerned and wonder if he's mentally fit to be president. And so this is another thing that comes up in the chart. Anytime you see planets conjunct the North Node, it's like really reinforcing the North Node and Venus being love and nurturing and healing and welcoming. It's like when I think of Cancer in the 9th, it's like instead of just beating people off, we should be saying, let us take you into our bosom and make changes and find ways to welcome the people who can make America better, not necessarily beat them off with a stick. And that's a lot of this is also because of the Capricorn moon. So, in the next year, and I'll go fast forward into time, but Saturn's going to hit the South Node and Pluto's going to become very, very, very close also with Saturn to the moon. And this relates specifically because it's in opposition to Mars. See this? Mars-Moon opposition. Learning not to be reactionary and defensive. What's really going to happen is that I think it's going to come down to, the way that we're communicating and talking to people, how he is opting to handle relations with others. A lot of it has to also do with financially, the information that's coming in financially. The third house also relates to contracts, short distance travel. In Capricorn, I think it more so relates to are we being too stern and authoritative, or are we needing to be more in the North Node of this Cancer? Now, watch what happens when we get into next year. So as early as even November, with the Sun, Jupiter, Mercury in the second house, you're going to be hearing a lot of stuff about what's going on in regards to the financial markets. But that's really, it's like any which way I cut it. When I get to January to about March, April of 2019, we see this same, and each chart, individual Saturn, Pluto, Mercury, South Node, and it's impacting the moon. And I think that because the moon rules his 4th house, okay, and it also rules his 10th house, this is when we see physical changes and shakeups in the White House. So once again, I don't think it's going to happen until then. I think we have to wait a little bit longer. Saturn and Pluto will be making squares to the ascendant and the descendant on this chart. So it's igniting a cardinal cross. And it's essentially, I think, pulling him out of it. It all comes down to whether or not he told the truth, what the truth was. Saturn square Uranus, legal situations, Pluto square Uranus, legal situations. But also this opposition of Cancer is like needing to be more nurturing and more humble and focusing more on the homeland rather than the dictator. So what does it all mean? What does this all mean? Well, I think that I'm definitely going to come back and I'm definitely going to do another, probably couple of videos. But essentially, it's about getting down to brass tacks in our country and really uprooting all of these issues. It's like we're not getting anything done. We're not getting anything done. And I'm hoping that's going to change, but we're not really seeing a lot as of 2000, at least in 17, is concerned, that has changed in America because we've been so consumed with this reality show circus act. And maybe it's going to take this over the next couple of years to shift and to happen before we're able to go and find people who can fill government positions who are more connected to the homeland, who are more conscious and aware of that we do need to have a variation of people in our country, that we do need to be practicing and being understanding and accepting of everyone. And it's just really highlighting our ugly side of our personalities as a country, and where we are still not catching up to where we should be as a whole. I do want to switch over now and show you guys a couple of the other charts, because I did talk about that. So let me find that for you. I also want to show you, what was it? It was Bill Clinton's chart, I think. The computer's doing some crazy stuff. Hold on. Okay, there we go. So let me find Bill's chart. Because in the same way that I think Clinton was dealing with all of this, you're going to see something very similar. Okay, there we go. Okay. So, oh, that's Trump and Clinton. Let me get rid of Trump. Okay, so, and I haven't really studied his chart entirely too much until recently, but I've got some notes here. So he served as president from 1993 to 2001. He's got that 26-degree sun, the same as Trump's Mars and Bush Jr.'s ascendant. The Clinton-Lewinsky scandal went on from 95 to 97, and it came to light in 1998. Now, there was a solar eclipse on August 21st, 1998 at 28 degrees of Leo, and it's similar to the eclipse that we experienced in August. Now, do I think that this is totally gonna ruin Bill Clinton? No. I mean, look, this is old news. You know, we know about this. We're conscious and we're aware of this, but very much in the same way, the North Node is transiting Clinton's Pluto, similar to Trump's. And I think that, you know, it screwed him, 19 years ago? And I think this time it's not as significant. However, I do think that it is happening all at the same time, because those same degrees are becoming ignited. I also think that it is highlighting in government, so much information in the 11th house, where we are having people who have a consistency to withhold information from the general public, or are acting with their egos still, or are participating in things that are not appropriate. It's like the Pluto and Scorpio generation, we're all just cracking up, because this is stuff that we've already come to terms with. Like, if anybody gets it, we get it. Sex, scandal, money, drugs, sex, rock and roll, like, we understand it. So this doesn't surprise us. However, I don't think that you are going to find that we are going to be tolerant of it, because we have a lot of us have many planets in Capricorn, and Capricorn poses a natural inconjunction to Leo. Essentially, Capricorn brings out Leo and Leo brings out Capricorn. So I do think that it's interesting that you've got a lot of people in their late 20s going into their 30s that are becoming very politically involved, because they're just not going to tolerate this anymore. And whenever you've got, you know, Jupiter and Scorpio igniting those Plutos and squaring those in Leo, things are going to come up to the surface. I mean, we are culturally a group of people who are natural detectives, and there is kind of a method to the madness. And I think that this is being brought up and it's being injected into the media, because what you're going to see here is that there needs to be kind of like an entire linear timeline. And that's why they compare a lot of what's gone on with Trump to Nixon. That's why they are comparing a lot of, you know, things that Bill Clinton have done to Trump. Although it's different, but it's not different, because there's a lot of conspiracy theorists who think that there's more going on with, you know, foreign deals that were going on with like uranium and all kinds of other things behind closed doors, and that this whole scandal with Monica Lewinsky was just a cover-up. And that, yes, he was going to be impeached, but he took the fall because there were so many other things that could have totally imploded, that could have been devastating and much, much, much worse. But he also has that 26 degrees. So he is coming off of issues in politics, okay? And he's coming off of this eclipse bringing him back, especially with the sun, back into the theme of politics. But this next one that's going to get him is the Pluto. And I think that, I was reading through about them unsealing some of the documents, and they were saying, well, we could go back and go through it, and it could have a lot to do with, phone records and where he was and what was happening. And I think that you're going to see something come up scandalous where there may be even more that went on than what we were aware of. And in a lot of ways, he got off the hook. But what's interesting to me is that you also see that Chiron is approaching his 7th house. And so it's currently being, it trines his natal Saturn, so it's 10th house. And anybody who's seen Hillary Clinton's chart knows that it's just a mess. And so I can imagine that there are going to be some things that are going to happen in regards to a partner's health and issues with her health. And she's just got a ton of planets in Scorpio, and it's in the 12th house. I don't even know if I have her chart, but I would imagine when this is all said and done, I don't think they're going to split, but I don't think you're going to see a lot of togetherness, basically. And it's not just because of what's coming out. I see this also because he's got quite a lineup in his 4th house that are making some squares to his 1st house. I mean, I looked at his chart and I went, good God, his Mars, Neptune, Venus. This is a guy who impulsively needed to have some kind of a relationship. And I always laugh because I've heard some crazy stuff. I've heard some people who claim that, they were together, but he cheated and she was a lesbian. I mean, I don't know. I would believe it. But people also say that they're reptilian, so who knows? So if I go missing, you guys know that the FBI got me. So pay attention, because also he has that same North Node Uranus. And that's very similar to Trump. It's in his 9th house. So I think that maybe perhaps a lot of the crap that's going on is very much coming off of, issues that date back to his presidency, and even date back even further than that. But there are similar issues that are coming up that were going on behind closed doors back then that are now happening now. So I don't think that all of the people who are the extremists and talking about, the Clintons and this whole thing that they have going where they have some kind of connection to the FBI. I mean, like, frankly, I don't care, but I do think that there may have been things that have gone on that were set in motion in terms of relationships with other countries that have just totally fucked America going forward. And Trump, our little buddy Trump, he illuminates that. And that's maybe why you're hearing him, talking about the Clintons so much. I don't know. It's very fascinating to me because they have a lot in common. And obviously, yeah, they're both born in 46 and they're not very far apart in terms of the date of birth, but there's so many similarities. So then I moved on and I was like, well, let's go and look at the Bush presidents. All right, so here's George W. Bush. And recently, okay, I'll throw right now on there, we have the North Node that hit his Pluto, or is going to hit his Pluto in a matter of a couple days. Stay with me because this is some complicated stuff. So the eclipse that we had earlier this year ignited this. And you see that recently his mother passed away. I think part of it is because you've got this Pluto-Mars in opposition to his Saturn. Saturn in opposition loosely to his sun, Cancer, the mother. And so then you go to the 4th house and you've got Jupiter in the 4th house. So his mom passed away. And I do think that his father is going to follow suit pretty soon. I say this primarily because, let's see, do I have some notes on him? Yeah, so basically with the Capricorn opposition, it's easy to see that his mother was undergoing hospitalization and then ultimately passing away. But that North Node Pluto and Mercury is still him receiving news of another death. And Leo relates specifically to the 5th house. And so we go and see where his sun is natally, the 12th house sun, dad being hospitalized. He may have some respiratory stuff going on. But also Jupiter is going to swing through his south node at some point in 2019. So it's like, yes, we'd have to look at his dad's chart, but I do think that his father may be next, or that he's going to have more messages of death that's coming, unfortunately. And him with Mars going into his 7th house and then going retrograde, I think maybe you're going to see like a lot more of Barbara Bush, and a lot more of her being out there in the media, or her being with him, and so you're going to see him a lot more. But unfortunately, I think that maybe, and we'd have to look at his chart, but you're going to see a little bit more of this happening for him in like the next year and a half. Okay. Something interesting is when I put his chart over America's chart, I'm like, here we go. So the outer is Bush Jr., so W. Bush. And you see some of the same themes that you see with Trump. Take a look at this. They happen to have the same sun, which is great. But the Saturn, Mercury, Pluto, Venus still sitting in the 8th house comes down to whether or not there was hidden agendas and financial agendas behind anything that had to do with his career or his position in government. And so for many years, there's been all of these conspiracies about 9/11 and the Bush family and their involvement in the oil companies, and whether or not they were benefiting off of war, or whether or not they were benefiting off of everything that took place with the war in Iraq. I actually think that there's something to this, having looked at the chart, especially considering that his North Node and his Uranus, similar to Trump, sits on America's Mars, initiating, a reactionary response. When we go and we look specifically at the 1st house, Mars, it's with other governments. I mean, essentially what's going on is the fact that we're constantly, at war with other countries, and we're so busy at war with other countries, we're not taking care of our own ship. And this goes back even further because of the history of our country, and the fact that what really ignited America opting to become independent of Britain was the Boston Massacre. So then, like, my wheels in my head started turning, and I was like, all right, so it takes some kind of significant attack on our land to initiate something. And so perhaps that was the beginning. And another marker may be, the more recent shootings that we have had in Las Vegas, in Florida, and these other places in the United States, where we may not necessarily be having a revolution yet, but this is also very similar to Civil War energy. And I think it's going to continue to build into 2020. So that's George Bush, Bush Sr., same stuff. Pluto Sun, Venus in the 8th, just barely, but it's there. Neptune is that as well. So I honestly think that there was a sense of kind of keeping this hidden a little bit better. I can certainly see with his Neptune there and the whole thing that he went on with, like the war on drugs. I can see that. And his just this repetitive 20 to 22 degrees of Gemini keeps coming up, and it keeps coming up where we are initiating things. All right. So let's look at Obama. Okay. Once again, same shit. The Mercury, the Sun, the Lilith, all still in the 8th house. So it's like, this doesn't necessarily mean that Obama is any better. I feel like, Obama's South Node is conjunct America's moon. And I think that maybe perhaps he was more relatable. And maybe perhaps that was somebody that was supposed to come in. Remember, even though it's conjunct the moon, his moon still opposes the North Node, which means, and his North Node is conjunct Uranus, by the way. He in many ways was rejected, because he was not the egotistical, I'm ridiculously rich and flashy kind of king. He, with the North Node Uranus Leo conjunction, was very much the opposite of that. Now, yes, he's a wealthy man, guys, okay? I know. He's sold his book and he's well off for the rest of his life, and he's currently hanging out on, tropical islands and all kinds of stuff. I'm not arguing that. Really what it comes down to is that I think the beginning started with Obama, and we needed to have this dramatic difference in who we had and who we have now to really shake everybody up. Now, he does have his Mars conjunct America's Neptune, so certainly I think that there was some deceptive qualities, and a lot of things that maybe he may have gotten away with a little bit better, but his ability to strive for peace, I think, is a little bit better. I do think that with all of these placements in his 9th house in Virgo, it relates back to his 6th house. And he does have that Uranus in Gemini. He does have, that moon in Aquarius. So it's kind of symbolic that he is, not his moon in Aquarius, his moon's in Gemini. He's a great talker. He communicates very well. But I don't necessarily think that he was the best for America either. But we needed to see these repetitive qualities of really heavy Leo and Cancer placement inside of America's, 7th and 8th house. Anything between Uranus and Pluto, maybe even Saturn stuff. But still, generations moving forward, okay, so if you look at, people who have, Pluto and Virgo, I think can be better, but I think you're going to see a lot more coming from people who have Pluto in Libra. So we're now talking about what is that? The people from like the mid 70s on. I don't know the exact dates, but people who have the Pluto in Libra moving forward are going to shake some stuff up. I want you guys to look at the people who have Pluto in Scorpio. Okay, because Pluto and Scorpio is going to land somewhere in America's 11th house too, where, Jupiter is there for us now. So we're already realizing that the government's fucked. But then we have the Pluto and Sag kids. And it's like, my faith are in these children who are going to hover somewhere around here. Okay. Yeah, somebody said he loved Lincoln. There's certainly a lot of similarities between those two. But his Saturn and his Jupiter sit conjunct Pluto. And I think what's very interesting is that his ability to govern without the obsession of wealth is more so the highlight that we needed to see. And like I said, I'm not saying that he was the best president. I think that anybody who signs up to become president, you're cleaning up the mess from people who were serving, 8 to 12 years ago. So you're already coming in with a huge job and a lot of problems. But it isn't really going to be until probably Saturn goes into Aquarius, like I said, that we're going to begin to start seeing some changes. Trying to see if there's anything else here that I really wanted to talk about. Yeah, I kind of touched on those degrees. I do have Nixon, which I think is kind of interesting. Let me pull Nixon up. Okay, Nixon. Okay. And this is why I'm talking about Nixon, actually, because I feel like the ghost of Nixon lives on. This is maybe why there is a lot of stuff that's coming up about connecting Trump to Watergate and similarities and things like that. Nixon had this 19 degrees sun in Pluto, sun in Capricorn. And right now Pluto is there. He also has, wow, let's see. He also has some similar conjunctions with the Aquarian stuff. And so you may see some similarities happening here in terms of how the general public is responding, with Mars going through there to information that comes out. But the reason why I'm talking about the ghost living on is because Pluto is currently conjunct, these degrees in Capricorn. And Saturn is going to come conjunct these degrees in Capricorn. So you may find that, specialists, legal specialists, people from the Watergate scandal, things from Watergate may be referenced. You also see here that his Neptune was exactly conjunct America's Mercury in the 8th house, so it's about hiding something. So I think that with the Pluto transits and the Mars and the South Node stuff, you're going to see a lot of similarities come about with Nixon's case. And so pay attention. Part of that's also because Saturn has hit Jupiter. So that's just kind of my off-the-cuff thing. People are talking about like youth being the future. I mean, that very much is the case. And like I said, there are so many people right now online and so many different astrologers giving their perspectives and giving their views on things that it's really challenging to dig through all of it and determine like which one you resonate with. And the truth is that I would encourage everybody to, go look more into some of the stuff I talked about. Go and see other people's perspectives. Go and take a look at some of the videos of the people who are talking about 2019 to 2021. Pay close attention to what's happening in the next couple weeks, because the squares that are going to be happening with Uranus and Mars is going to begin to show you in 3 or 4 years' time where those changes will be made. Hopefully. Get more involved. If you don't know what's going on in the world, go and educate yourself. And certainly I don't think the only outlet is the news. I think that the news is polluted with information from both sides. And it's really challenging for us right now to be able to get direct information that we can trust on both sides. And with the Mars South Node conjunctions in Aquarius soon, we are going to start questioning where we're getting our information from. We're going to start questioning, there's going to be more that's going to come out in terms of legal situations because of our own security on the internet. And you'll see more that will come from the recent sessions with Zuckerberg and his statements that he has made and potential changes in legislation with how people are receiving our information and therefore flooding our news outlets with things. So there are changes being made. It's very slow, but things are going to shift. I will do another video in the coming months as I see what happens. I don't want to do too many of these, but if you want to see my original, go and type in Trump Astrology. You'll see me. I was on Lada, and you can kind of see I made that prediction about the inauguration chart before he was even inaugurated. Oh, there was something else I want to show you guys. So the full moon that's coming, if you missed my full moon video, I just did it, I think yesterday. I want to show you, not America's chart, but California's chart. You know what, I'll show it to you, but I'll do another video. But basically, like, that full moon that's coming is on California's moon that sits, like, conjunct the ascendant. So California, 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 it's a big theme. Let me pull it up really quick. Some of you guys have to go. Thank you. It was nice to see you. Thanks for being here. This is a very long video, even for me. So thanks for hanging in. But yeah, so take a look at this really quick. Okay. Here's the natal. Here's the now. On the 29th, we have this full moon. And it's something's up here, because there's going to be a lot of information around California. I think things are going to move a little bit more quickly than we are aware of, especially in regards to financial talks and kind of preparing before we're really making some major news. All this Gemini in the 8th house and the relation back to the 3rd maybe where there was more pushback from California in regards to the decisions that we're making about sanctuary cities. Maybe perhaps there is going to be some conflict in the news outlets. There may be some drama that's happening, especially because we are seeing that currently these planets are also making some trines to the 7th house. And so I think somehow California is going to make some news here pretty quickly. And don't forget that Uranus, we're having our Uranus return. So it's conjunct our Pluto-Uranus. So essentially, like, California is not taking any shit. There may be some changes with some healthcare stuff where they might be talking about healthcare for individuals and making sure that people have coverage regardless of their income or regardless of what's going on with their immigration status, or if they're here legally. This can be a very touchy subject, to be honest with you, because I see both sides of it. And like, I come from like a border town in Arizona, and I get it, but I also can't help but be sympathetic for a lot of these families and a lot of these people, because you've got people that came here when they were children. They didn't have a choice. So who are we to deny them the right to have basic privileges like education and medical, services, or denying them the ability to have citizenship or the right to vote or the right to drive? So there's a lot that's going to come of this, and I am very proud to live in California. And I think that California is very much in a state of rebellion. And watch that 29 degrees of Aries, because Uranus is going to go back and forth. So I think that as things progress in the United States on a more federal level, we will rebel. And you've seen us do it with pot. You've seen us do it with immigration. I would say that it's very possible that California may be leading the way for succession from the United States, and showing other countries that we may not necessarily resonate with federal regulations, and that we do want to be putting out a hand and trying to live in a way that is much more diplomatic, but also, like I said, not taking any shit. So that's kind of wild. I don't think that there's anybody here old enough who's had a Uranus return, but I think that's like every 70 something years. So, those of us who have it, it's, I would imagine, very insane. Yeah, my dad's in the chat. He's making comments about a very progressive governor running in November. But we're seeing this everywhere. We're also seeing very progressive people running in Brooklyn and in parts of New York and parts of Florida. And this is amazing, because what's really going on is all of these planets that are going to, conjunct and make aspects to the South Node in Aquarius is the people are taking back the Republic. So I encourage you guys to educate yourselves. Get out there and vote, or don't vote. But if you don't like what's going on in your country, then you need to start being more participatory in your city and state and your local governments, and calling your congressmen or congresswomen, or opting to do things to create change rather than creating chaos, because there's going to be a lot of chaos. There's going to be a lot of protesting. There's going to be a lot of conflict in the world, and we're seeing it everywhere else, but especially here in America. I think that we have a very exciting time and an opportunity to be able to kind of turn a new leaf, and maybe potentially start focusing more on our quality of government, our quality of life, rather than our wealth. And I'm going to leave it at that. So I'm going to thank everybody for being here with me and giving me this time to just play, to just talk, to be able to take a look at these charts and listening to what I have to say. I'm sure I will be back. I'll do more of this. And I appreciate, as always, your likes, your comments, your shares. This is a very, very long video, so maybe I'll come back and I'll do some more on some specific segments, especially with California, and what's going to be happening with Trump later in the next couple of months. As always, I love being here. If you guys need anything from me, there is a link in just below this little box, so you can see my website and get my personal information. If you would like a personal reading, you may hit subscribe and check out my website where you can have access to my schedule at any time. If you want to get a hold of me personally, you're more than welcome to send me an email at candace@beyondtheveiltarot.com. That's CANDACE @beyondtheveiltarot.com. I look forward to those because they're always colorful after these political videos. But until then, be well, guys, and I will see you on next Monday. All right, bye-bye.